Remove the shorts or leave the pool. That's your choice. Cora Millwright, the self-appointed compliance officer of Lakehurst Point Villas, didn't even look at Mira when she said it. She was addressing me, loud enough for the dozen other residents lounging nearby to hear. But her eyes were locked on my 15-year-old niece like she was some kind of threat. She extended the violation slip toward me with 2 fingers like it was contaminated. Violation 8C, non-standard swimwear. Final warning. I didn't reach for it. Is that policy ratified under Chapter 181 of the Wisconsin Non-Stock Corporation Law? I asked, my voice even. Cora blinked. She wasn't expecting the question, and she definitely wasn't expecting someone to call her bluff in front of an audience. Before I go on, let me ask you this. Have you ever watched someone shame a child in public and realized you were the only adult willing to do something about it? Subscribe now if you've ever seen an HOA go too far, because this story only gets uglier from here. I'm Everett Tullis. I moved here 6 months ago to help care for my niece Mira after my sister's funeral. What Cora didn't know, and should have thought about before going after her, is that I spent 18 years investigating civil rights violations for the federal government, and 5 more as a private consultant, specializing in housing law. I don't bluff, I document. And what I saw that day wasn't just a rule being misapplied. It was a grown woman in a power role humiliating a grieving child in front of strangers because she wore quick-dry swim shorts over her one-piece on a public pool deck in 90-degree heat. Mira didn't speak. She couldn't. Her arms were crossed tightly over her stomach, and her swim towel was clutched like armor. I knew that look. It was the same one her mother used to wear in the hospital, pretending not to be in pain. The shorts? They weren't some fashion statement. Mira wore them because chemotherapy wrecked her confidence, and a few scars still dot her legs. She's 15. She wanted to swim without anyone staring. But Cora saw shorts, and all she thought about was her laminated sign about pool uniformity. What nobody tells you when you join an HOA like Lakehurst Point is that people like Cora don't enforce the rules. They invent them, and then dare you to challenge them in a room full of silent neighbors who just want to stay out of it. I took the citation slip from her fingers, looked at it like evidence. Violation 8C, it read. Unapproved attire, loose outerwear may obstruct filters or reduce visibility of skin contact. I read it again, then I read the last line. Resident noncompliance may result in suspension of all amenity access. My jaw tightened. You want to know why this matters? Because Mira hasn't smiled since her mother died. She barely speaks unless it's about school or books. The only thing that gets her outside is swimming, something that reminds her of summers when things were okay. And this was the first time she'd gone near water since the funeral. She finally stepped outside, and Cora met her there with a laminated citation and a weaponized clipboard. So, no, this wasn't about pool filters. This was about control. The kind of control people like Cora Millwright cling to when they have nothing else to offer the world. The same kind of control that turns HOA meetings into witch hunts and innocent kids into targets. You've seen it. Maybe you've lived it. I stood between Mira and Cora, holding that slip of paper like it might catch fire in my hands. I wasn't angry yet. Not the kind of angry that explodes. The other kind, the one that cools your blood and makes you calculate. I looked down at Mira. You can go inside, sweetheart. I'll handle this. She didn't speak, just nodded and walked away, towel clutched tight. Cora watched her go, smug as ever, then turned to face me with her chin high. I turned to leave, but not before snapping a photo of the posted pool sign, one Cora herself had printed and taped above the entrance weeks ago. No signatures, no board approval, no reference to any bylaw, just one line, only HOA-approved swimwear permitted. That sign would be her downfall. She just didn't know it yet, because the rule wasn't real, and neither, legally speaking, was she. The sign fluttered in the breeze as I stepped away, its tape already curling from the corners. No official stamp, no ratified bylaw number, no authorizing signature, just the echo of authority, made louder by silence. By the time I caught up with Mira, she was already inside my condo, drying her hair in the hallway bathroom with the door cracked open. She didn't want to talk, and I didn't push her. I've learned that trust isn't rebuilt through words, it's rebuilt through action. I needed clarity. Was Cora's little laminated rule an isolated power play, or part of something bigger? That's why I walked across the street to the barbecue by the lakeside. It wasn't my usual scene, and I hadn't planned to socialize, but I knew that in HOA communities like this one, the real record wasn't in the minutes. It was in the murmurs. A folding table sagged under the weight of foil trays and plastic cups. Kids ran barefoot through the grass. Lawn chairs clustered in familiar circles. I grabbed a soda and stood off to the side, observing, listening. It didn't take long. Did she go after your girl too? A woman in her 60s leaned over, holding a plate of ribs. Cora, pool sign. I raised an eyebrow. You've seen it happen before? Twice this month, she said. My granddaughter wore a rash guard because she burns easy. Cora called it non-conforming and said we were setting a bad example. We left before it got ugly. A man standing nearby chimed in. My daughter's been skipping the pool entirely, too scared she'll get fined or yelled at. There's no list of what's allowed, just that dumb sign. There it was, the pattern. 3 different families, same target, teenage girls, same justification. A pool sign that no one remembered voting on. A few others joined in, quietly at first, then more openly once they realized I wasn't here to defend the board. A single dad talked about being threatened with suspension of privileges because his autistic son used noise-canceling headphones by the hot tub. An older couple whispered about a decorum violation they received when their niece wore nail polish to the community gym. The HOA, it seemed, had been turning selective enforcement into a weapon, and Cora was the hand on the trigger. I asked one question that made a few people go quiet again. Do any of you know when the last board election was? A woman shrugged. We didn't vote this year. They said there weren't enough nominations. That's what they said last year too, someone else muttered, which meant something important. Without proper elections, the board might be sitting on expired terms. And if that's true, everything they've done since is potentially void. I didn't smile, not yet. But I did feel the first real click of leverage sliding into place. This wasn't just about pool shorts anymore. This was about governance and legitimacy. Cora had violated my niece's dignity. But the more dangerous truth was this. She might have done it with no legal authority whatsoever. If I could prove that, I thanked them for their honesty and walked the edge of the lake alone, replaying every line from the HOA emails I'd skimmed, every rule posted on bulletin boards, every vague threat scribbled into violation slips. It all felt hollow now, paper armor, wrapped around nothing. Back at my unit, Mira had curled up on the couch with her earbuds in, watching something on her tablet. She didn't say anything as I walked past. I just gently set a fresh lemonade on the side table near her elbow. She looked up. Thanks? I nodded once. We're not letting this go. It was a promise, not just to her, but to my sister. I'd left the federal game years ago, burned out on bureaucracy. But the law never left me, and now it was time to bring it home. The difference this time? I wasn't acting as an investigator. I was acting as an uncle, and that makes you far more dangerous. The next morning, I found him where I figured he'd be, down by the fitness room, slipping in early before the pool crowd rolled out of bed. Ryan Ashby, HOA lifeguard, 20-something, wiry build, always wearing headphones like armor. But not today. Today his ears were bare and his shoulders tense, like he'd been waiting for this. He didn't look at me when I stepped inside, just kept wiping down the treadmill handles like they were going to confess something. I closed the door behind me. Ryan, his hands paused mid-wipe. Hey, voice tight, clipped, still not looking at me. You saw what happened yesterday. I was just doing my job, Mr. Tullis. I walked a few steps closer, not aggressive, just enough to let the silence fill the room. The kind of silence that makes liars sweat and truth crawl out of the floorboards. I'd used it 100 times in interrogation rooms. Apparently, it worked in gyms too. Ryan set the rag down. His fingers fidgeted at the hem of his polo shirt. Look, I didn't mean for it to go like that. I thought she was just going to give a warning. She told a grieving teenager to strip on a public pool deck. He winced. I know. I let that sit. Watched him swallow hard. One hand came up to rub the back of his neck. The other curled into a fist, then opened again. Classic tells. Internal tug of war. He was angry, but afraid. Not of me. Of her. You know the sign isn't a real bylaw. He finally looked at me. There's no list, no handbook, just that laminated thing she put up. You enforce rules that don't exist? She told me it was board approved, said if I didn't back her up, she'd report me for insubordination, said it'd go on my license. And did she show you a bylaw? No. He looked away again. She said I didn't need to see it, that it was internal. There it was, not just overreach, deception, and now a potential witness. I'm filing a complaint, I said, but I need corroboration. You were there. You saw the violation notice. You saw the sign. I did, he said, voice soft. But if I testify, I could lose my contract. I nodded slowly. Or you could help stop her before she does this to someone else. Think she'll stop with Mira? His jaw clenched. He picked up the rag again, then just held it, twisting it between his hands like rope. She called me last night, he muttered. Said not to talk to you. Said you're looking for things that don't matter. Do they matter to you? He didn't answer that. Instead, he turned and stared out the small window near the back of the room. The lake shimmered beyond the trees, calm and still, a sharp contrast to what was churning inside him. She scares me, he said finally. She has everyone on that board wrapped around her finger. People owe her favors, jobs, babysitting, loan approvals. She knows things. I stepped back, gave him space. You don't have to decide now, but think about this. Mira didn't get to choose whether she got shamed in front of strangers. That was forced on her. What you do next, that's on you. He nodded once, slowly. I'll think about it. As I left, I glanced back. He was still holding the rag, still looking out the window, frozen between silence and something like resolve. I didn't know if he'd step forward, but I'd seen that look before, in rookies who'd stayed quiet for too long. Ryan Ashby was one push away from becoming more than just a bystander, and I was going to give him that push, whether he liked it or not, because every piece of this puzzle mattered now. Every pair of eyes, every moment of hesitation. It would all come together in the end, when Cora realized her rules weren't rules, and her power wasn't real. By the time I got back to the unit, a new email was waiting. Subject line in all caps. Final notice. Amenity access. Suspension imminent. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made a slow cup of coffee, let the steam rise into the quiet kitchen, let myself feel the weight of the next step. Then, I sat down and clicked. The message came from the official Lakehurst Point Villas HOA address, but it didn't read like something crafted by a board. It read like a threat typed by a woman with a grudge. Due to repeated noncompliance with posted amenity guidelines, including documented attire violations and unauthorized pool use, resident Mira Tullis is hereby subject to immediate review for full amenity suspension. A $150 enforcement fee may apply. That line, unauthorized pool use, hit like a second slap. As if Mira, a 15-year-old girl trying to grieve in peace, was some kind of trespasser. I scrolled to the bottom, no citation of a specific bylaw, no minutes attached, just a threat with a logo. I printed it. Next, I walked to the HOA drop box near the community garden, that empty little shed Cora had converted into a policy center. Posted outside was a fresh flyer, this one in bold font and neon colors, taped next to the sign-in sheet for the annual pool cleaning volunteers. Pool dress code reminder. Only HOA-approved swimwear permitted. Infractions may result in suspension and monetary penalties. No definitions, no details, no link to anything that resembled law, just more bark and no teeth. I took a photo, then another, from every angle. A neighbor passing by gave me a nod, the kind people give when they recognize tension but don't want to get involved. I nodded back. Not now, not yet. I spent the next 2 hours at a public co-working lounge on the edge of town. Neutral territory, clean Wi-Fi, quiet enough to think. I pulled up the HOA's online portal and logged in using my owner credentials. Navigated to the bylaws section. Clicked through the PDFs, searched for any reference to dress code, swimwear, 8C, violation enforcement, or amenity suspension. Nothing, no policy, no vote, no clause that gave Cora, or anyone, authority to issue fines or suspend access based on attire. The only vaguely related passage was about sanitation guidelines to preserve community health. And even that required a 2-3 vote for enforcement. I double-checked the violation Mira received. It cited him 8C, but there was no 8C. The bylaws stopped at 8B. She had made it up. That's when the pressure inside my chest shifted. Not anger this time, not even satisfaction, just confirmation. This wasn't rule enforcement, it was impersonation. Cora Millwright had issued fake citations under the banner of a real HOA, and in doing so, opened herself to civil liability. She hadn't just shamed my niece, she'd impersonated legal authority. That changed everything. Now, we weren't just dealing with misconduct, we were dealing with fraud. And in Wisconsin, under Chapter 181 of the Non-Stock Corporation Law, any board officer acting beyond their term without a proper vote could nullify their standing, and every act that followed. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. The last legitimate board election had occurred 18 months ago. The minutes were posted, but the page after that, where the vote results should have been, was blank. Just a heading, no names, no counts, no sign of ratification. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Cora wasn't just enforcing imaginary rules. She was doing it without a valid position to begin with, which meant every violation she'd issued could be challenged, every fine, every suspension, every public shaming. If I played this right, I wouldn't just protect Mira. I could take down the entire board and force a re-election. I closed the laptop and slid it into my bag. The sun had dipped low outside the window. I checked my phone. One new text from Mira. "Can we go swimming somewhere else this weekend?" I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "We will, but first, I've got one more thing to do." I parked outside the neutral co-working space again the next morning, this time with a sharper goal. No more feeling around the edges. I had enough to open the box. Now I needed to lock the hinges shut. The building was quiet, just the hum of printers and the low clack of distant keyboards. I settled into a corner booth, pulled out my laptop, and started drafting. This wasn't just about filing a complaint. It was about ensuring it couldn't be ignored. Step 1. I opened a formal request for board certification and policy ratification records. Wisconsin law was clear. If an HOA board acts on expired terms, fails to hold proper elections, or enforces unratified rules, they're operating beyond their authority. And any fines, citations, or disciplinary actions tied to those actions, voided. I wasn't just challenging a citation, I was challenging the entire framework under which it was issued. But to move forward, I needed hard proof of structural failure, something the Department of Financial Institutions would act on. So I pivoted to the HOA's third-party management company, Kellner Property Solutions, the ones technically responsible for storing ratified bylaws and annual election records. I drafted a formal inquiry. Pursuant to Chapter 181-1602 of the Wisconsin Non-Stock Corporation Law, I'm requesting certified records of Lakehurst Point Villas HOA's board election results for the past 2 cycles, along with all membership-ratified policy amendments tied to amenity enforcement or attire restrictions. Then I added something most homeowners would miss, but that no management company likes to see. If these records are unavailable or incomplete, I will file a formal non-compliance petition through the state's Division of Corporate and Consumer Services. This will include a request for independent audit and board review. I copied my attorney friend at the bottom, just for weight. After that, I uploaded digital evidence, the photos of the pool sign, the bogus 8C citation, the laminated flyers, and the HOA email that threatened Mira with fines based on imaginary policies. Each file was named, time-stamped, and cross-referenced to the HOA portal's current policy listings, which, of course, contained none of the above. It was the kind of packet that told a story, not just of overreach, but fabrication. I hit send. Then I moved to step 2, the insurance angle. HOAs like Lakehurst Point don't run without liability coverage, and insurance companies don't like paying out claims caused by illegitimate governance. If even one underwriter got wind that Cora had issued a public citation to a minor based on an unratified policy, without a valid board term, that could trigger a coverage review, that meant real leverage. I didn't need them to cancel the policy. I just needed them to start asking questions. So I drafted a short cover letter to Shoreview Mutual Risk, the listed carrier for Lakehurst Point Villas. Included a summary of the violation, Cora's title, and the relevant state codes. Attached the same packet. Marked it as potential governance liability exposure, youth rights violation. I wasn't accusing, not yet. I was warning. By the time I shut the laptop, my coffee had gone cold. But my path forward was hot. Everything Cora had built, her little empire of fear and faux rules, was now in the hands of two entities she couldn't manipulate, a state agency and an underwriter. And unlike residents, they don't talk it out in community meetings. They audit. I packed up and stepped outside, blinking against the sunlight. Checked my phone again. Still no reply from Kellner, expected. I dialed Ryan instead. He didn't answer, but that was fine. I left a message. Hey, just letting you know I filed. You're not on the hook for anything yet, but things are about to move fast. If you want to be part of fixing this, now's the time. I hung up and looked out over the sidewalk, where a row of parked bikes shimmered in the heat. One of them had a pair of gym shorts rolled into its basket. For a second, I thought of Mira, and then I thought of every other kid who'd been pushed off a pool deck because someone like Cora needed to feel powerful. They'd picked the wrong neighborhood this time. The first real crack came 2 days later, when a memo from Kellner Property Solutions landed in my inbox. No salutation, no apology, just a curt one-paragraph response and a PDF attachment labeled HOA Election and Ratification Summary. Internal reference only. I read it 3 times. The document confirmed what I'd already suspected. No election had been held since the last recorded board cycle over 18 months ago. The listed president, vice president, and compliance officer, including Cora Millwright, were all noted as continuing members, presumed term carryovers pending next quorum. Presumed. That word doesn't hold up in court. There was no ratified authority, no quorum, no confirmation vote. And buried at the bottom was the sentence that finally shifted this from theory to breach. No documentation provided for any new or amended policy between January of last year and present. Prior drafts never reached community voting stage due to participation thresholds not being met, which meant every pool sign, every violation notice, every fine, and every verbal threat over attire had been enforced under non-existent policy and issued by board members without standing. I sat back in the chair of the small-town diner I'd chosen that morning, the kind with sun-faded menus and Formica booths. Mira was across from me, halfway through her pancake stack, earbuds in, chin propped on her hand. She hadn't asked about the case. She didn't need to. She trusted me to fix it, and now I could. I slid the laptop shut and signaled the waitress for the check. But before I left, I opened one more app, Shoreview Mutual Risks General Inquiry Portal. Still nothing from the underwriters. No confirmation. No questions. Not yet. That didn't worry me. Insurance companies never send warning shots. When they move, it's surgical. Outside, the sky was hazy. The lake glinted behind the buildings, wind-teasing ripples across the surface. Mira walked beside me quietly, kicking at loose stones with her sandals. "You okay?" I asked. She shrugged. "Fine." But I could tell she wasn't. Not really. Her body language was smaller than usual, shoulders tucked, eyes low, that inward tension kids wear when they've been shamed and haven't found language for it yet. And that was the thing no policy would ever account for. Cora hadn't just embarrassed her in public. She'd hollowed something out, made Mira feel like a rule breaker for simply existing as she was. And now, it wasn't just about getting a retraction or apology. It was about making sure nobody else's kid got backed into that corner. Later that day, while Mira was napping, I took a walk around the community, not aimless, calculated. HOA power thrives in the shadows, on silence, resignation, plausible authority. I wanted to see who else had been caught in it. At the far end of the complex, near the tennis courts, I spotted an elderly man hauling a pool float from his car. I recognized him from the barbecue, the one who'd whispered about his niece being flagged for gym attire. I approached. "Hey, Mr. Pendry, right?" He nodded cautiously. "You're Mira's uncle." I nodded back. "Ever get a formal violation for that incident with your niece?" He laughed bitterly. "Never anything written. Just a voicemail saying she was causing reputational concerns. That's the phrase they used. I jotted it down, word for word. Then I gave him my number and told him what I was doing, without details, but enough to spark curiosity. By dusk, I had 5 more quiet conversations, each one more detailed than the last. One woman had screenshots of text messages from Cora, pressuring her to remove non-compliant images from her daughter's social media if they wanted to stay in good standing. Another recalled being warned not to align with disruptive neighbors. The picture was complete now, not just a few oversteps. A pattern of coercion, impersonation, and abuse of power under a fabricated mandate. Back at home, I sat on the porch and looked out at the pool, empty now, still. But the sign still hung there, bold as ever. Tomorrow, I'd make the first formal move. But tonight, I let it all settle. Because now, the strategy was more than theory. The threat was documented. The violations were traceable. And Cora Millwright was standing on legal ice so thin, I could already hear it cracking. The pool was still empty the next morning, but the clubhouse lights glowed like a beacon across the courtyard. I'd chosen the spot deliberately, neutral ground, public enough to make Ryan feel safer, private enough for a real conversation. If he was going to talk, it had to be now. He arrived 5 minutes late, still in his lifeguard polo, eyes darting between the door and the windows, like he was checking for cameras. He carried a duffel bag, but kept it slung on one shoulder, a barrier between us. When he saw me sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, he hesitated. "Appreciate you coming," I said, sliding one toward the empty chair. He lowered the bag, but didn't sit right away. His fingers gripped the strap, knuckles whitening, then loosening. He finally exhaled and sat down. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered. "She told me you're building a case." I held his gaze. "I'm not building anything. I'm protecting my niece. But I can't stop what's already in motion. That's why you're here." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking everywhere but at me. "I've seen what she does to people who cross her." I leaned back, letting the silence settle the way it had in the fitness room. He shifted in his chair, tapping one foot, then the other. His body was a map of conflict, shoulders hunched forward, eyes flicking to the door, hands fidgeting with his ID badge. Finally, he spoke. "You're right about the sign." I stayed quiet. She made it herself, printed it at her office job, brought it in one morning and told me to post it by the gate. Said the board approved it, but didn't. Want a paper trail because people get weird about votes. He glanced up at me, testing my reaction. I kept it calm, steady. "She's been doing this for months," he went on. "Pool rules, gym rules, even the parking permits. Most of it isn't in the bylaws, but she tells the board it's temporary, tells residents it's permanent, and tells me I'll lose my contract if I don't enforce it." "Do you have proof?" I asked softly. He nodded, then hesitated. His hand went to the duffel bag, unzipping it halfway. Inside was a battered tablet, screen cracked across one corner. He pulled it out like contraband and set it between us. Screenshots, messages, her telling me what to say, when to say it, threatening me with blacklisting if I don't follow orders. It's all time-stamped. I didn't know who to give it to. If I go to the board, she'll bury me. If I go public, I'll get sued. I slid the tablet toward me, but didn't open anything yet. "You just did the hardest part. You told someone." His shoulders slumped, the tension leaving in a slow wave. "She called me last night again, said if I leak anything, she'll make sure my lifeguard license gets flagged for misconduct. She even said she'd tell people I was staring at kids." That landed like a stone between us. It wasn't just coercion, it was character assassination waiting to happen. I reached across the table, fingers resting lightly on the tablet. "You're under contract with the HOA, not her personally. She has no legal authority to threaten your license. Everything she's done to intimidate you, every message, is evidence of retaliation. And that's exactly what the state needs to see." He stared at me, breathing shallow. "You can stop her?" "I can stop the board, and when the board's gone, she goes with it." Ryan's eyes flicked to the window again, but this time his posture shifted, shoulders squared, chin lifted a fraction. "Then take it, all of it. I'll testify if I have to." "Are you sure?" He swallowed. "Yeah, I'm tired of being part of it." I slid the tablet fully to my side of the table. "You're doing the right thing." He gave a weak laugh. "Feels like jumping off a cliff." Sometimes that's what doing the right thing feels like. Outside, the pool shimmered in the morning sun, silent and waiting. The laminated sign still hung there, but it felt smaller now, like a paper crown before a storm. With Ryan's confession, the case shifted from speculation to proof. Cora's rule wasn't just unratified, it was fabricated and enforced under threat. And now, I had a witness. I left the clubhouse with Ryan's tablet tucked under my arm, like evidence in a sealed bag. He walked the opposite way, head low, but shoulders finely relaxed, like he'd handed off more than just a screen. I didn't go home, not yet. I needed a quiet place to work, uninterrupted, a location outside the neighborhood, away from Cora's surveillance lines. I drove 15 minutes to the county law library, a red-bricked relic tucked behind the courthouse, quiet as a chapel and twice as honest. Inside, the clerk barely looked up when I signed in. Good, that's what I needed. Space, silence, and no interruptions. I took a corner table, set up my laptop, and unlocked Ryan's tablet. The messages were all there, screenshots of Cora texting instructions. Remind him that if they keep breaking dress code, I'll suspend their pool access. No need to mention that the vote didn't go through. It's more of a policy guideline. If you don't enforce this, you're putting your license at risk. Don't make me escalate. Threats, false authority, clear coercion, and every one of them time-stamped, with message headers matching her known number, the same one listed on the HOA's official email footers. I didn't need to embellish a thing. The facts were damning on their own. I drafted the next escalation. This time, I wasn't just filing complaints. I was building a legal package, formal governance challenge addressed to the Department of Financial Institutions, citing Chapter 181 violations, expired board terms, failure to hold elections, and invalid enforcement mechanisms. Supplemental evidence packet including Ryan's screenshots and sworn summary, the bogus 8C violation, slip photos of unratified signage, email threats sent to me and others, the Kellner document confirming no new policy had been ratified, a civil harm letter, drafted but not yet sent, outlining potential defamation and emotional injury claims on behalf of Mira, pending legal advice. I uploaded everything into a clean, secure folder, backed it up twice, shared it with a legal contact I trusted, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, but who still owed me a favor from a tenant discrimination case I helped untangle down in Racine. Then I made the last strategic move of the day. I composed a short, calm, deadly email to Kellner Property Solutions. No legal jargon, no threats, just professional pressure, the kind they couldn't ignore. Please be advised that several board actions taken over the past 18 months, specifically those involving amenity access and enforcement, appear to have originated from unratified policies and non-seated board officers. As I've now submitted full documentation to the Department of Financial Institutions, I urge your office to review the attached exhibits and notify your underwriters accordingly. I'll reserve any public disclosure pending internal corrective action. Response requested within 48 hours. That last sentence, that was the trigger. Insurance carriers hate risk, and Kellner would hate even more to be seen as complicit in rule enforcement under fraudulent authority. I wasn't threatening exposure. I was offering a silent out. Correct this quietly, or the state and your insurers will do it for you. When I hit send, I felt the shift. Not emotional, tactical. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was an operation. By the time I walked out of the library, the sun was lowering behind the courthouse dome. I passed a cluster of law students on the steps, talking fast, hands full of highlighters and outlines. It reminded me of a younger version of myself, fired up, hungry, too green to understand how long real change takes. But this fight, this one wasn't about precedent or theory. It was about Mira. I checked my phone on the walk back to the car. One new message from Ryan. If they come after me, I'm ready. I've had enough of hiding. I didn't reply. I just locked the screen and got behind the wheel. Tomorrow, I'd deliver the full packet in person to the HOA management office. Not for theatrics, for impact. And I wanted eyes on me when I handed it over, because the legal groundwork was done. Now it was time to knock on the foundation and wait for the whole thing to shake loose. The next morning, I didn't dress like someone dropping off a complaint. I dressed like someone delivering a verdict. Slacks, collared shirt, leather portfolio tucked under one arm. If I was going to walk into Kellner Property Solutions with every crack in their system highlighted in red ink, I wanted them to remember it. Their office sat in a repurposed strip mall outside town, wedged between a UPS store and a vacant yoga studio. Plain brick, forgettable. Just how most management firms liked it. Low profile, low accountability. Inside, the lobby was stale with printer heat and the faint scent of bad coffee. A single receptionist manned the desk, mid-40s, friendly in a tired way. "Name?" she asked. "Everett Tullis, homeowner, Lakehurst Point Villas. I'm here to deliver a legal packet regarding board authority and policy violations." She blinked, straightened a little. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, setting the portfolio on the counter. "But this is the kind of packet that doesn't wait for appointments." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The weight of the words did it for me. She glanced at the label on the folder, then picked up the phone. "I'll see if someone from compliance is available." I sat in the corner of the waiting area while she whispered behind the glass divider. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Eventually, a thin man in a navy pullover appeared, clipboard in hand, name tag crooked. "Mr. Tullis, I'm Mark. Would you mind stepping into the conference room?" He said it like it was an offer. It wasn't. The room was windowless, sterile. One long table, 2 chairs, a pitcher of water already sweating onto the laminate. Mark closed the door behind us. "We understand there's been some concern about the HOA enforcement language. Let's not start with soft terms," I cut in. "There's been impersonation of ratified policy, retaliation threats against contracted staff, expired board terms, and fabricated citations issued to minors. I've documented all of it." He didn't blink, but his pen tapped once, fast, against the clipboard. "I assume you've received the digital copy?" "Yes," he said, "and our legal review team has flagged it as material risk," I finished for him, "especially given that your own internal records confirm the last board election was incomplete. The term extensions are presumptive, not ratified. That voids every act taken under their authority." I opened the portfolio and slid the paper copy across the table. "This includes screenshots from your contracted staff, statements from residents, and a formal certification request under Chapter 181. I've already submitted this to the Department of Financial Institutions. Their reply should be in your inbox within 72 hours. Mark didn't reach for the folder. He just stared at it like it was glowing. "We're prepared to begin corrective action," he said slowly. "But this needs to be handled carefully. If the board is officially found non-compliant, then the entire HOA's authority structure collapses," I said. "Which means every fine, every suspension, every intimidation tactic used under Cora Millwright's direction becomes a liability for them, for you, and for your underwriters." He didn't argue, didn't protest. He just finally picked up the folder and said, "We'll respond in writing within 48 hours. "Good," I said, standing, "because I'm giving the community 48 hours before I go public." That wasn't an empty threat. My next meeting was already set, with a local reporter who'd been sniffing around Lakehurst's HOA drama for months. She didn't need the whole story. Just one verified fact that the board had been enforcing ghost rules on children. And now I had that in triplicate. Back in the car, I let the tension out in one long breath. My hands were steady, but my heart hadn't caught up. The strategy had become real the moment I looked that compliance officer in the eye and said what no one else had dared to say out loud. Cora Millwright doesn't speak for us. She never did. The question was whether Kellner would act fast enough to protect their own skin, or whether they'd double down and force this into the open. Either way, the trap was set. And the next time the community gathered, I wouldn't be the one on the defensive. The email from Kellner came less than 24 hours later. Short, surgical, and proof that the leverage had landed where it needed to. "Mr. Tullis, in light of newly surfaced documentation and community feedback, we are calling a special board session this Thursday at 7:00 p.m. in the Lakehurst Point Villas clubhouse to review recent compliance practices. Residents are encouraged to attend. No apology, no admission of fault, just a rushed attempt to control what was rapidly unraveling." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Ryan with a single sentence. "Pack your notes, we're up." It was time for the confrontation. The next 3 days, I stayed quiet. Let the air simmer. Let word spread. By Thursday, the neighborhood was crackling with something between curiosity and tension. The pool was empty. Cora hadn't been seen much. No morning walks, no clipboard patrols, but the sign was still up. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't backing down. She was digging in. At 6:55 p.m., I walked into the clubhouse with Mira beside me, not because I wanted her to witness the fallout, but because she deserved to see what it looks like when the rules that hurt you get pulled apart in front of everyone. The room was already half full. Folded chairs formed stiff rows under humming fluorescents. A folding table at the front bore a stack of handouts labeled Community Decorum Update Proposal. Nothing official, just spin. Cora Millwright stood behind that table, hands clasped, dressed like a news anchor, posture tight. Her eyes scanned the room like she was still in control, like she could still win this. She spotted me and Mira at the back and flinched, only slightly, but I saw it. A few board members were seated beside her, names I recognized from the PDFs. None of them looked happy to be there. I waited until exactly 7:03 when she cleared her throat and stepped forward. This special session, she began, was called in response to ongoing confusion regarding HOA policy enforcement, particularly around amenity access and community attire standards. Confusion, I murmured. Mira, beside me, didn't speak, but her hand tightened around mine. Cora launched into her statement, blaming poor documentation, outdated portals, misunderstandings between staff and leadership. She used words like regretful, but not once did she say wrong. Then she made her first real mistake. She turned toward the crowd and said, "I'd like to thank our contracted team for supporting the board's goals, especially Ryan Ashby, who's upheld these policies with professionalism under pressure." I stood up. "Actually," I said, "Mr. Ashby has something to say." Gasps aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they're just quick breaths sucked between clenched teeth. Ryan rose from the side row, tablet in hand, and walked calmly to the front. He didn't look at her. Not once. "I've been the lifeguard here for 2 years," he said, "and I followed instructions I was told came from the board. But after everything I've seen, and the messages I've received, I have to say this. I was told to enforce rules that weren't real." He lifted the tablet. "These messages from Mrs. Millwright tell me to post unapproved signs, threaten families with violations, and use my job to intimidate residents into following policies that never went through a vote. She told me not to question it." Silence. Pin drop silence. Cora stepped forward, face flushed. "Those messages were informal guidance, not—" I cut her off. "They were threats, and they were issued while your board seat was legally expired. According to Kellner Property Solutions' own certification log, your term ended 14 months ago." I pulled a printed sheet from my folder and handed it to the resident nearest me. "Which means every violation notice, every suspension threat, every public reprimand you made against minors, including my niece, was done under fraudulent standing." The room turned. It didn't shout, it didn't cheer, but it shifted, like a tide that had suddenly pulled back from shore and revealed something ugly in the sand. One woman near the front spoke up. "Are you saying everything she's done is void?" "No," I said. "I'm saying it's worse. It was never valid to begin with." Cora didn't speak again. Not that night. For a long second after my words, the clubhouse was nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the slow tick of the wall clock above Cora's head. Then the murmuring started, low at first, like a gust sneaking under a door, and then building as residents passed my printed sheet hand to hand, reading the lines out loud. "Expired term," one man muttered. "No ratified policy," another whispered. Across the rows, faces changed shape. Confusion, dawning realization, then the brittle anger of people who realized they'd been conned. The crowd wasn't hostile to me. They were hostile to the illusion they'd been living under. Cora stood rigid at the folding table, fingers gripping the edge, knuckles bleaching. "This is a mischaracterization," she said sharply. "The board acted in good faith." But the crowd cut her off. An older woman in the front row rose and pointed a shaking hand toward the sign-up sheet for the Community Decorum Update Proposal, stacked by Cora's elbow. "You said last year we'd vote on new policies. We never voted. You just posted signs. My granddaughter was banned from the playground for wearing tights." "I have emails," another resident called out. "You said our family could be fined for noise if my son's therapy dog barked at the pool." More people stood now, dozens of voices overlapping. It wasn't chaos yet, but it was close. every unspoken grievance dragging itself into the light. Ryan was still at the front, tablet in hand. He didn't flinch, didn't shrink. His jaw was set, but his eyes flicked from Cora to me, like he was bracing for fallout. He'd jumped off the cliff, and now he was falling into the crowd's hands. I raised my voice just enough to slice through the noise. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. According to Kellner Property Solutions' own documents, this board hasn't had legal standing for more than a year. Any fines or suspensions issued under expired authority are invalid, and every one of you has the right to demand a re-election. The room went still again, but not silent. It was a charged stillness, the moment before a fuse reaches powder. A man from the back row, tall and heavy-set, spoke up. "So, what happens to all the fines we paid?" "They're challengeable," I said. "With the Department of Financial Institutions reviewing, you'll have a path to restitution. But first, you need a new board that actually represents you." Someone else called, "And what about her?" All eyes swung back to Cora. She tried to stand taller, but her hands trembled against the table. "This is an ambush," she snapped. "A smear campaign by a disgruntled homeowner. None of you understand how much work I've put into this community." "You shamed a child," a woman near the middle row shouted. "My neighbor's daughter came home crying because of your sign." Another voice. "You told us if we didn't comply, our mortgages would be flagged." More murmurs, more memories, the air thick with betrayal. Cora's face flushed crimson. "These were guidelines," she hissed. "Temporary guidelines until we could formalize." "They were threats," Ryan said. He spoke softly, but everyone heard. "And you used me to deliver them." It was the first time he'd looked at her directly all night. His shoulders squared. The duffel bag at his feet might as well have been a shield. Cora's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked at the board members seated beside her for backup, but none of them moved. One man even slid his chair an inch away. "This special session," I said, "was called by Kellner to address compliance practices. But it's now a public record of a board operating without legal authority. You can step down tonight and allow an independent audit, or the state will suspend the board and do it for you." A wave of sound rolled through the crowd. Applause mixed with angry shouts, not at me, at her. Cora's grip slipped from the table edge. She sank into the folding chair behind her, eyes darting across the room, searching for an ally. She didn't find one. I scanned the faces. People who'd been too afraid to speak now leaning forward, phones raised, recording. Not for gossip, for evidence. Mira sat near the back with her arms folded, watching it all. Her posture was different now, chin up, eyes steady. She'd seen the rules turned inside out in public, and maybe, just maybe, the shame she'd been carrying felt a little lighter. This was no longer my fight alone. It was a room full of neighbors, voices rising, the tide turning. 3 days after the meeting, the sign came down. Not quietly, not at night. It happened mid-morning, with residents watching from balconies, front steps, and second-story windows as two men from Kellner Property Solutions peeled the laminated pool dress code notice off the gate, folded it once, and dropped it in a bin. No speech, no warning, just removal, like a bandage, yanked off a wound everyone had tried to ignore. By the end of the week, an official notice was sent to all homeowners. The current board of Lakehurst Point Villas is hereby suspended pending state oversight. A temporary transition team will be appointed by Kellner Property Solutions to facilitate community operations until a legal election is held. Any fines, suspensions, or policy enforcements issued after the last recorded ratified term will be reviewed and, if applicable, reversed. It wasn't an apology. It was surrender. Cora Millwright never issued a public statement. One day she was seen packing boxes into the back of her SUV. 2 days later, her unit was up for sale. Ryan's contract was renewed, this time with legal protection clauses and a formal agreement that policy must be board ratified before being enforced. He still showed up to the pool early, but now with his chin a little higher, no longer watching his own shadow. As for Mira, she asked me quietly if she could go back to the pool again. We went that Saturday afternoon. The sun was out, the water was warm, and she walked through the gate in her quick-dry shorts, towel over one shoulder. No eyes following her but mine, no clipboard, no citation, just space. She swam for an hour, and when she came out, She didn't wrap herself in a towel immediately. She just stood there dripping, arms open, face tilted to the sun like she finally belonged. A few neighbors came over to say hi. One offered us watermelon. Another asked if I'd consider running for the new board. I said I'd think about it, but the truth is, I didn't want power. I just wanted the people who abused it to be held accountable. That was enough. Later, we walked to the clubhouse, and Mira noticed something taped to the inside of the glass bulletin board, a single sheet of paper, pinned with a thumbtack. No logo, no header, just a quote, printed in bold. Authority that cannot be questioned is not authority. It's fear wearing a name tag. Someone had signed it anonymously. A neighbor who finally spoke up. I didn't need to know who wrote it. I just knew they were right. This wasn't just about swimwear. It never was. It was about people like Cora hiding behind silence, behind unratified bylaws and weaponized suggestions, hoping no one would notice the difference between law and performance. But someone did. And then someone else. And then a roomful. That's how fear collapses. Not with noise, but with someone asking the right question at the right time, and someone else daring to answer. As for me, I still keep a copy of the bogus violation notice in my drawer, not for revenge, for memory. A reminder that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to let someone tell you what the rules are, until they prove they were ever real to begin with. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.